Oh no.
I'm totally missing.
Okay, framework.
Framework case.
Yeah.
Counterplan K.
I'm thinking about it.
And on the K, I'm going to go to the firm first, at the bottom, and then go back up to the top. Everybody ready? At the top, holding their original interpretation, call for their written framework plain text because they do not solve a lot of the offense. They see fluidity means no stable ground, but you don't get your generic state good ground true, but fluidity is good because it is reality that all these systems are fluid and you try and debate yourself in an insulated box. This links them back into all of their bay. Evidence is bad, they're insulated politics, etc. because they're insulated from the real world. It means all of their arguments about how they can't confront or change anything is all insulated because they try and keep things static. And also you have no rights to these dissents because switch side debate means you would have to do segregation good bad. It would solve all your resolution arguments. Our ground is it just predictable. We are both sides, and you had a pre-round prep. A, this is not new. B, it's on the casebook. And C, Amy, you have seen this run this before. And we do not make them say genocide good, but you can say what you do is not genocide. You can say what you do is not genocide, i.e. defense against our impacts, and then you can read impacts as to why we are bad, and their ground is good. Card links to Labarth, Nancy, and Norris are K of the community. They result in the purification tragedies because they would always say that the ground is tied to the community. This card specifically references the word community, I'm pretty sure, but even if it doesn't, it's based on the community norm of ground. They also link to our Rosestone's euponic evidence exonerating the responsibility of law, their interpretation. They try and spin in the 1 and R that we have to defend the state. Always exonerates our responsibility. They'll explain in more depth on the criticism. We don't need our counter-interpretation because our competing interpretations are always flawed. They're arbitrary based on just whatever they chose to write down, and it's always a fluid, which means it doesn't answer our blanket argument. I did not say in the 1AC that we don't endorse the state. I said that we do not endorse the state in the 1AC, but we reserve the right to perm. This is not shifty. We have explicitly stated this. I'm pretty sure that it is on Matt Moore's camera. Instead of the blanket evidence, it answers the truth claims good and well. A, they are the dominant stock story. This links them into the Delgado evidence as well, that they say the legal system, etc., that people have to read their stories to them. We are the only ones who allow access to beauty of life, which goes well with their subpoint B agency that they can see it was the biggest impact in the round, that the only way to access agency and subjectivity is through your mobile subjectivities and your ability to engage in everyday acts of resistance. And C, and terms should not be stable. Words and systems are fluid. We should not act as if they are not, because this allows us, this is dangerous when we do so, because it allows us to ignore the way the world changes around us. And their truth claims good is a double term with all of their Giroux evidence, and also it is a directly answered by our fluidity arguments above. Case. Group it. This is inconsistent with your Giroux and your counterplan. All of your arguments about locking in authoritarianism and your arguments evidence would all be inconsistent because Giroux says we could use the extent grades cross-text. It's embarrassing. On this question, and B, we are not from a position of privilege. We can make new space and temporarity and work well outside of it. They're the ones in position of privilege. They say, come to our schools. We will integrate you in well through our counterplan, where we use the high and mighty Supreme Court, the most privileged people in the nation. And they don't co-opt the Bleicher evidence that everyday resistance can only endure in conjunction with our deployment of the affirmative. And also, their everyday resistance could not work in the world of their counterplan because they call the Supreme Court once and then exonerate their responsibility, links them into Rosso, and they encourage, and this evidence is internal link turned by our Norris, our Labarth and Nancy evidence. Their evidence is talking about him trying to become the Nietzschean Superman, but that's turned by the Labarth and Nancy because it is not the gulag that results in Nietzsche, but rather their notion of community. Now they said counterplan. Pepsi challenge was conceded from Crossix. They did not read the Yamamoto evidence, which means the counterplan has no impact out of this round. They were very talkative about how good this evidence would be, but they have no evidence that their call to the Supreme Court changes anything, which means this round is simply about competing who has the most agency and creates the most agency for you as individuals. They have read no evidence about how they create agency for individuals, which means they lose, extend the permutations to numerous options, solves all their retreat from the state bad arguments, and has multiple net benefits of being able to create individual agency and subjectivity. They say the preamble proves we can be interpreted, but they did not write down the preamble, which means this is the most fluid argument in the round, which means they can be co-opted by the permutation. They say retreat from the straight cause of violence, but group their Jerome Box. Evan takes in our Jerome syndicates how the state incorporations are capable of co-opting schools now, which means it is internal link turned by all of their Evans Enterprise Education Battle 600 Labarth and Nancy have this movement that we have to retreat from this community, move away from this offense they can totally not solve because they're called to the Supreme Court. They're called for their pedagogy of public resistance, all linked back into this. The impact is the violent communication or violent purges of the community because we have to exclude those that do not fit within our norms. This is our warrant. They have only defense on this. They have not not read Eternison, the ethics dis ad robo and zuponic. Hey, we do not exonerate our responsibility to the law, which is what the internal specific link is. It's the bureaucrats, the Supreme Court, exactly what the counter plan and framework does be. This is what all of their evidence talk about. See, this is what allows genocide of individuals, because we can always say it's not our fault. The Serbian purges, we gave you voting rights, which means that you do not have to worry about the kind of violence we do. See, G is this impact turns framework and all their book chin evidence and all their other arguments against Bay. And also this means that the permutation would definitely solve their Barbarokia evidence, because all their other Bay Baddest evidence, because they would always be incorporated into our system, and we do not exonerate. But exonerating responsibility to the state, or they say state is inevitable, what exonerating your responsibility to the state is not. Now extend the Delgado evidence, their amicus brief card is literally a joke. They lost cards up your stock stories and convince narrative violence by fragmenting, falsifying, and forgetting stories of the oppressed. Delgado's 5-2K4. Courts cover up your stories in little unfamiliar pieces. They kill your narrative and transform something you do not recognize. This is injustice. Similarly, falsifying someone's life story is an epistemic analog of historical. Think of amnesia. Amnesia fascinates some because lives are first who they are. Their narratives are gone. They cannot tell stories of lives. More stroke and are terrifying because they destroy memory. They destroy narratives, killing person narrative past who they kill. Leading to mass skin, nerves, bone, alert enough, exhorting skin, and surface life does much the same extent or other arguments. They're all self-mature jurisprudence. All of these arguments that we have extended to impact trend decay, which is where I'm at now in the permutation we don't. The permutation does not co-opt our system. That means we can exist in one moment on the next. And two is that their K of A contradicts Jerome, Tim, Gabriel, and cross-section. This means they don't actually see their book genetics or anything else. They're being against Bay 3 except Jerome. So the state has created a world in which we have ignored the politics of everyday art. 4, we are not the discourse of neoliberalism. They engage in the insulated individuals in the Supreme Court, which are the most private individuals of the whole nation. Their notion of the public sphere of the government is also what their Drew evidence criticizes. ISIS 5, all their Drew evidence supports reform. 6, we can be a crack in the system. They don't have to defend the ideology of the app. We just have to defend what we defended. And the one I see the top beam is really blippy on all this. We'll hold them to the 2. And see, we participate in the public sphere of street art and everyday resistance. And so they're the ideology they indent because counterplot, and because they say only the government controls the public, being no powerful. They are narcissists of the state. We're not narcissism. Their Drew evidence is out of context. You should read all of the underlying parts of their Drew evidence to see if it goes through their books and evidence. To indict Blight doesn't indict Blight, or we don't reject the state in every instance. We just say that we have to have beauty outside of it. None of this impact turns co-optation either.
9:15.
Let's smoke cigarettes.